I'd like to call the regular meeting of the Municipal Planning Commission to order at 7:10 p.m. on March 10th, 2015. First item on the agenda is the opening. 1.1 is the prayer and pledge. Mayor Patty Carroll is going to say the prayer for us.
Dear Heavenly Father, thank you so much for bringing us here together. Thank you for this great group of people that are serving their community. Thank you for the citizens that come out, that want to be involved, that care about the future. Be with us as we make decisions tonight. Thank you for all the blessings you've given us. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Item number 2 is approval of the agenda, and I would like to note that 8.2 and 8.3 under new business are withdrawn.
Move for approval.
Second.
I have a first and a second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Item number 3 is citizens' comments.
Madam Chairman, there is no citizens' comments tonight.
Thank you. Item number 4 is approval of the minutes, 4.1, February 10th, 2015, regular meeting.
Move to approve. Second.
I have a first and a second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Item number 5 is recommendations. 5.1, rezoning application for property located on Old Nashville Road, map 42, parcel 65.12, 1 acre, from RS10 to RM12, owner Timothy Mangrum.
I'd like to recuse myself from this, please.
Thank you.
Move to approve.
Madam Chairman, those are just recommendations. They've already gone to the board.
Okay.
Okay.
They were approved by the board, PLC.
Okay, so they've been approved by the board.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I'm still confused, though. The recommendations, then why do we have to, why is it on our agenda if there's not a
It's informational.
Okay,
That you made, that was a recommendation. 5.1 and 5.2 is a recommendation to the board. The board at its last meeting approved me preparing the documents. I have those documents prepared, and they're in the hands of the recorder now.
okay. I'm just not sure why it's on our agenda if we don't have to take a vote, but
To
is
inform
there
you-
anything y'all were going to tell us?
Since you made the recommendation, we thought it's always good to let you know what happened, because sometimes the board don't go along with it. And then you
Okay.
know that they didn't go along with it, or they did go along with it. They authorized me to prepare the documents, and I have done so.
Okay.
Okay, so I will read 5.2, but it's just for information only. Discuss and/or take action on an ordinance to amend City of Fairview, Tennessee Municipal Zoning Code, Article 17, Section 16-104.3, Board of Zoning Appeals membership.
Madam Chairman, I believe that was just so that you can insert a member from the Board of Commissioners would have a right to vote in case it was a tie or not enough there to fill the board.
Thank you. That's how I took it as well. Number 6, 6.1, Sweetbriar Springs, performance bond to cover the roads, sewer, water, drainage, erosion, street, sign allowance, and emergency access, $45,000. The Planning Commission reduced the amount on June 14, 2005. Bond is set to expire April 16, 2015. Mr. Humber?
This, the owner has been notified by certified mail that their bond is about to expire. We put it on this month's agenda because next month it would only be 3 days before the expiration. This is, we don't have a replacement at this point. So the appropriate action is for, the planning commission to say we call a bond.
I'll make a motion to call the bond if it's not reinstated by April 16th, 2015.
Second.
I have a first and a second. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Number 8, new business, 8.1, one-lot subdivision on 7300 Stark Lane, 5.
7.1.
Oh, sorry. Let's back up. Number 7, old business. 7.1, discuss or take action on the proposed elevations to the King Market and consider a variance for the required parking spaces located at 1528 Highway 96 North, map 18, parcel 4.01.33 acres, owner Saynath LLC. Is anyone here representing King Market?
Russell Hayes.
Pat, you named several things earlier. You can go over.
Yes, I'd like to make a motion for discussion.
Second.
First, on the building facade, well, this is actually the canopy. Per our design review manual, it's 2-104 architectural character. Number 2 directly speaks to convenience markets and gas stations. And basically, the canopy supports shall consist of brick and stone and extend through the roof line of the canopy. The base of the support shall be stone 4 feet above grade and finished out with brick. I'd like to see that addressed. And then further with the design review, it speaks to having, just a moment. This is under 5.105.3 detail features, and this is for the building facade. And for facade, for this definition, it's also what can be seen by streets and right-of-ways. So the front and the right side of the building. But basically, there will need to be some type of reveal or offset in the building's face and right side, and at no minimum than 20 feet apart. Further detail, we could get with Frank and kind of show you the page design. But basically, what we're wanting instead of a flat wall is some offsets
An
throughout.
offset column.
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
Walmart's that way, isn't it?
Yes, yeah. Those are the two things on the building design I have. And then I guess as parking, it looks like I don't see any changes from the last site plan.
There's two additional
Is there two additional?
spaces, but I understand normally, I know y'all's code, I think the way we looked at it, we've got 6 spaces underneath the canopy, which we normally use those as parking spaces.
Yeah, our code won't allow that, though.
No.
It has to be a striped parking spot located next to the building. But you've got 2 more than what you had last
We've
time?
added 2, we've got a total of 9. There's one on the right-hand side of the building, and then one out next to Highway 96.
I think you're probably ready to move forward with a variance on that if y'all choose to do so. On the parking part.
Okay.
The other comments that Mr. Beata spoke of, are those can y'all handle taking care of those requirements?
Yeah, that,
I don't see that as an issue
yeah, that won't be a problem.
Okay.
Will we need to come back, or can we work this in office as far as the,
Everybody's clear on it, it's in the motion, I don't know why that our staff couldn't handle that.
Yeah. So the motion will be to approve with the changes made, suggested by the board, and the acceptance of a variance through the zoning and appeals board, or everything.
Board of Zoning Appeals will
Board
not
of
see
Zoning
this if we do it here.
Well,
We can
okay.
grant a variance here.
You can grant the variance here, and you can pass it subject to him making the corrections that Mr. Beata had suggested, or you can require him to make the changes and then come back. That's your call.
Don't expedite it best we can, so I would like to change the motion, if I could, to have the improvements that Commissioner Beata put in place, to approve. Do we need to approve the variance for the parking spaces in this motion? Blair? Do we need to ask for the variance in this motion right here?
You can ask for it, yeah.
Ask for
just-
the motion in this right here to comply with 9 parking places. And upon that, completion of that, move forward with the occupancy. Your motion.
Second that.
Can you clarify the
Ye-
changes you want on
Yes,
this,
so
just for the
for-
record, so everybody's clear?
Sure. So first, regarding the canopy posts, they'll need to be stone 4 feet above grade and then brick the rest of the way. It does call for those to project past the roof. It doesn't give a description of what the minimum reveal is above the canopy.
I don't, I'm a little bit lost on that. The columns do not, they stop at the deck. On a gas canopy, you don't, I don't understand how we could go above the canopy with a brick.
Well, I would just assume the weight would carry up through it. I believe the MAPCO has done that, has executed that, so you might want to take a look at that. And then second is the offsets in the building, and those could be done either through doing a recess in the building or doing a projection.
A bump out is okay.
I would think on the front, they have to be a minimum of 20 feet apart. I think on the front, it would probably make sense just to do maybe 2 kickouts, like kind of bookends on the face of the building.
Okay.
And then the side of the building, it's 50 foot long. So I would think doing 3, doing 1 on each corner and then 1 centered, and either a recess or a bump out.
Did you want brick instead of the drive it? Was that in your corrections too, on the facade?
The drivet? No, I think that's actually in line with the
Okay.
proposal. The only thing in the design review that speaks of it is that it needs to be 5 feet from the ground, which I believe they have that, so.
If I can, Frank, do you have any questions about that? No. So you understand what we want?
Okay, did we get a second?
Yes.
Okay, we got a second.
We have a first and a second. Any more discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Number 8 is new business, 8.1, one-lot subdivision at 7300 Stark Lane, 5.68 acres, map 18, parcel 14.00, zones RS40. Jason and Shannon Langford, owners. Mr. Beata, would you please read the engineer's comments?
All right. Engineer comments for item 8.1. It is important to note that the recording of this plat will formally establish Lot 1 as shown on the plat is the first lot formally recognized by the city as having received access by way of the permanent easement shown on the plat. At the time any additional future lots are platted, that would require the use of the proposed ingress-egress easement An access way shall be constructed within the easement, which will meet or exceed the standards for design and construction of public ways set forth in the subdivision regulations as called for in section 1-113.107 of the subdivision regulations.
Move to approve.
Second.
We have a first and a second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. 8.2 and 8.3 have been withdrawn. 8.4, rezoning application for the property located on Cox Pike, map 43, parcel 3, 0.01, and 31.00, 32.19 acres, from RS40 residential to RM8 PUD, Plan Unit Development, Denny, Proctor, and Welch owners. Is anyone here to represent? Would you like to, Mr. Viata, read the engineer's comments, please?
All right. The engineer comments for item 8.4, number 1. It is important to note that the concept plan that is being submitted as a part of the rezoning application does not include detailed engineering design for the proposed roads, drainage, or grading. All proposed roadways, drainage components, and grading will be required to meet all City of Fairview standards at the time those detailed plans are submitted for review. The detailed engineer design for the site may warrant the necessity to alter the layout of the concept plan in order for the site to be compliant with all technical design standards for roadways, drainage, and grading. Number 2, a traffic study will be required to determine the impact the proposed development will have on the existing roads in the area. Improvements to the existing roads that are recommended in the traffic study will be required to be constructed by the developer or applicant. Number 3, it is recommended that proposed driveway widths be a minimum of 20 feet wide. Number 4, please note that the layout of the submitted conceptual plan is wholly dependent on the applicant receiving TDEC approval for the proposed direct discharge of treated sanitary sewer effluent to the adjacent streams. TDEC generally recommends allowing 6 to 12 months for their permitting process of the proposed system. And that's all.
Move to approve.
A second.
We have a first and a second. Any discussion?
I have some. So this is just the rezoning of the property. So the TDEC approval, all that comes for later, for the 8.5. Are you saying to rezone it?
And Mr. Humber may want to speak to this, but the rezoning of a property when it is designated with a PUD overlay includes the actual conceptual layout. So if you choose to approve the conceptual layout as presented, I would strongly recommend that it be contingent upon the applicant receiving the appropriate TDEC permits for the proposed sanitary sewer system. Because if those permits aren't received, the conceptual layout in front of you doesn't exist anymore. So that's why that comment is that, again, any approvals tonight would need to be contingent upon those permits being received by the applicant from TDEC.
Well, I agree with that, actually, but I was sitting there and wondering why that would be under the rezoning, because it doesn't, I mean, we can rezone it, and then if they don't get the approval, then they could still choose another route. Like, is it basically due to the system, the drip system?
Yeah, with planned unit developments, the rezoning, it also includes the actual layout of the lots. That's the conceptual layout. So it's different from just a generic rezoning to, say, an RS20. Then correct. If all you're doing is rezoning a property to an RS20, then we have no, at this stage, we would have no concern with what the potential layout might be. But when you're dealing with a PUD, a Planned Unit Development Overlay District, part of that process is that the rezoning with that overlay district includes the actual layout that's proposed in the preliminary master plan, which is, in this case, it's entitled the conceptual plan. So that's why it's tied together in this
Okay.
instance.
I just didn't want to delay, and I needed clarification, I appreciate that. But I didn't want to delay because there are other options, and if that's the TDAC approval for the system was the problem, then I was just wanting to make sure that we were making sure everything was covered.
Mayor, to put that another way, once, if this board approves this to go to the Board of Commissioners, once they approve it, that plan becomes the zoning. And any change in that plan would require rezoning here.
Okay.
Going through the packet, I was a little surprised that there wasn't any soil scientist information on what the soil type is there. I didn't see a preliminary engineer report on the sewer itself. It just is comments by the developer. For me personally, it's a little hard to approve a 125 lot development, not knowing that if the soil and if that we could supply the sewer on that site. Another thing, I keep talking about soil. My understanding through Water Authority of Dixon is that they're, the whole reason they're pushing us towards a step system is for the subsurface drainage of the effluent. And I noticed something in here about effluent discharge into a creek. And that kind of is another point of not seeing any letter from Water Authority of Dixon. So I guess who's going to be managing this system long-term?
Just to be I'll answer that. And the applicant can add if he desires. The reason there was no soil work submitted at this stage is because the applicant has expressed the desire to have a direct discharge, not drip irrigation, thereby not requiring any approved soil areas. So the effluent from the septic tanks would go through a sand filter, would go through UV disinfection, which is a proven. We're not here to debate that that technical aspect. That's a proven system that TDEC regularly permits across the state. So that's not a concern that we're looking at tonight. The difference, a little bit of the uniqueness that is associated with it is once it's treated, then what do we do with it? Mm-hmm. There are numerous systems in which once it's treated, it is drip irrigated, mm-hmm. where you have irrigation lines that are underground in an open field that is fenced and regulated by that permit that TDEC issues. The applicant has expressed the desire, instead of going that route, to direct discharge that treated effluent. It's treated water, and mm-hmm. it's treated to a very high standard, mm-hmm. But directly discharge that to an adjacent stream. Mm-hmm. That, again, would involve significant levels of engineering studies to be submitted to TDEC for their permitting authority. I am not currently aware of any systems like this that are permitted for direct discharge. I know there's a reference to one in Wilson County. I pulled that permit up today. There's actually 2 permits that were issued, state operating permits. Both of them involve one of them spray irrigation for a golf course, and the other one is drip irrigation. I don't believe either have direct discharges, but I may be mistaken on that. So that's why you didn't see any soil data, any preliminary soil data for this particular proposal. Does that answer kind of
Yes.
the questions on that?
Has anybody contacted TDEC with this proposal?
May I speak? My name is Tom Smythe. I'm the one that authored this as the developer.
Okay.
There's a lot of catch-22s implicit to what I've outlined briefly. I installed the first step system in Watkins Creek in 2002, working with the Pickney brothers, who were sponsored by TDEC That was a 4-year process to get clearance between the state and Williamson County for the installation. So during that period, I became intimately acquainted with the various aspects of the system. I established communication with the gentleman, Mike Thornton, who's the field supervisor and who has been since then continuously active in most of the counties surrounding Nashville with various implementations of the STEP system. He's the one that told me about the Pinecrest discharge permit that goes hand in hand with the use of it for spray irrigation purposes and with an emergency drip holding area. That was typical with what we did as well for Williamson County. We had an initial set aside of high perk armor silt soils. That's 45-second perk. It's the best soils you can get. We had to go out and buy 30 acres of adjacent high perk soils just so that we could use the on-site STEP system. We were the first in Williamson County. We additionally had to set aside a secondary field for drip against the unlikely, but nonetheless theoretically possible situation where heavy rains would sump out the high perk soils, forcing a backup of potable water. But even though it's potable technically, they wanted an emergency backup. And so it's not unusual through a lot of these systems that have been set up, just like you have septic fields with lines in the septic field. And in Williamson County, frequently, if they approve a 5-bedroom house with a 5,000 square foot septic field, you have to have another 5,000 square foot backup field in case the first one at some point doesn't work. Similarly, these STEP systems initially involved double redundancy backup systems. And a lot of that is now maturing in the market, and that's why now, 15 years later, they're experimenting with direct discharge. I would like to do that because the economies of scale favor discharging what is drinkable water into a running stream. And we have running blue lines, as I showed you in the map, downhill to either side. So we are superimposing the subdivision on a ridge top that's natural to the lay of the land, and the irrigation would simply flow down by gravity to the toe of this build-out. And the cleansed water, which we have any number of sites that could be set aside for the filtration system itself, it takes less than 1 acre, could then discharge clean, ultraviolet treated, potable water into the blue lines. That's the ideal. I have backup plans involving the purchase of more land, but that is the ideal, so that's the way I phrased it. The reason I backed into this, and I know some of you are in the business and are builders, we've got a situation where, as I see it, just like Nolensville, when it became its own jurisdiction, wanted to grow the mid-level housing so they could bring in families in homes 200 to 250,000 to build up the community. They built Bent Creek. Steve Cross developed it in 2003, 2004. It was the first subdivision to tap into the new sewer system, which involved an extension of the metro system down into Nolensville. They built small lots. They brought in a great number, because it's a large subdivision of homes in that price point. The market collapsed. They're building out the remainder of those lots now in the same price point. Fairview needs lots that can be sold efficiently to builders who can then locally build homes, good design standards, for people who can afford a $225,000 to $250,000 house. And I've designed the lots and I've designed the system in such a way that I think I can give them lots at approximately $35,000 for a 2,000 square foot home. In other words, under $20 a square foot. You can't build a house today for less than $95 a square foot and make it a really decent house. Well, right there, you're up to $115 a square foot, and houses are selling today for $125 a square foot in Fairview. Everywhere else in Williamson County, they're selling for $150 a square foot. There's no margin there for a builder to build these homes unless I can deliver a package of smaller lots with an amenity center on a good location that will bring people into a community and respond to that need. So that's what's driving this. And your engineer is quite correct. There's a lot of discussion that's going to have to go on with TDEC to determine how we ultimately put this on the ground. This is my ideal. This is the format I'd like to follow. Everything depends on the people involved and the degree to which we can stay flexible to these objectives.
I can ask a question, or a couple of questions, actually. As the plan that you stated right now, and you want to run it off into the creek, is that Turnbull Creek? What creek is that?
It's a confluence of three that join into one that runs down the Dice Lampley Road.
Okay,
I don't know that it has a name.
okay. Frankly,
It does.
what is, what's the density on that, for that area out there, for the overlay?
We've got, in this area, we have, land use plan calls for medium density for park areas out here. This particular area is positive, and land use plan is low density. It should be pretty close to what the zoning is, what the zoning is now. But, in order to do this, basically you'd be amending the land use plan to allow more of the, this is considered more, not even, it's not really medium density, it's more of a higher density. It's the same zoning as Brownland Trails has. Of course, their location is directly on I-7. I'm not saying,
96.
one way or another.
96.
I'm giving you an example.
96.
I'm sorry, 96.
Okay.
And so you've got, basically, this is, we've got, this is lower density on the land use plan. It would be, taking action, you'd actually be changing your land use plan to a
High density.
higher density, higher density. Because this, right now we've got, like, this is R40, minimum 40,000 square foot lot. Which is, just about 1 unit an acre. And then, like Colson Place and the other subdivisions there, R20. Those are basically 2.2, like it says in the code, that's 2.2 units per acre. This is over 3, or this is closer to 4.
Yeah, it's 3.8, so I rounded it to 4.
4 units an acre. So the next classification would be the RM8, which would allow more than, see, there's an RS15 that allows 2.9. Then to go to a higher density, you go to RM8, which allows as many as 8 per acre, but that's really for multifamily.
That's close to what we're talking about here, isn't it?
Yeah, well, it's just, we're talking about 4 units an acre. But in order for him to develop what he's talking about here, he'd have to have that classification.
That's what I'm saying.
So that's more than a quarter acre lot, or it's quarter acre?
No, it's less.
Less?
Eighth
Eighth of an
of an
acre.
acre.
It's a 5,000 square foot lot. It's about 50 foot wide by 100 to 110 foot deep. So depending on the topography, it's 50 foot wide, that's what's critical, and it's between 100 and 120 deep, depending on how the land rolls.
Mayor, he's talking about almost 4 units an acre. lots are a lot smaller. You could do, before an acre, you would have you could possibly have quarter acre lots, if you were gonna develop the whole property. Does that make sense?
Yeah. There's a couple things that come across. We have actually been introduced the sand filtration system for a while now because Dixon Water Authority has kind of been pushing that. So some of us have had time to absorb. And I've done a lot of research recently on them, and I have a good understanding, and also tried to research the system you're proposing. But there's a few things I think as a board we need to be concerned with. Did Dixon Water give you any kind of regulations, rules and regulations for?
Yeah, we spent about an hour with Mike Adams and his other engineers, and he said he's 100% behind what I've proposed. The two basic criteria that I'm trying to streamline involve the discharge. He said they will assume responsibility for monitoring the water quality, maintaining that monitoring, and they will support an application for discharging potable water, which means it's not just treated by the sand filter, it's shot with ultraviolet. They will support that application for discharge into these streams. They would encourage that if TDEC would approve it. The fallback I'd ask for, if they didn't approve that, would be that I can put it into storage tanks below grade or into open storage ponds. Any detention area, which is primarily meant to trap sediment so that water slowly drains filtered through it, can be turned into a holding pond as well. And what I'd like to do is I'd like to store the treated water for use for irrigation throughout all this open space, because out of 32 acres, I'm going to have almost 12 to 15 acres of open space that'll be cluster planted to add to the view planes that everyone will be able to share in the common areas. So I would like to reuse it as spray irrigation. That would be the fallback. The last option would be just throwing it back into the ground after you treated it. That seems like a waste to me. Secondly, each house normally has a 1,500-gallon septic tank that is specially engineered with a filter. It's a cylinder that goes over the discharge to keep all the particulate in the tank so that the actual gray water that floods out of the tank passes through 1.5-inch PVC lines. And with a gravity feed, like I've set up on this design, there'll be no need for grinder pumps. Gravity will just take the gray water to a collection point, and then it's at that collection point taken to the filtration system. So there are many flexible alternatives here. I'm just telling you in order of preference the way I'd rather go. The advantage with the tanks is a 1,500-gallon tank is more than sufficient to 2 homes, whereas normally it's installed for every home. So I'd like to put them in the public right-of-way, just in front of the sidewalk in an 8-foot strip of grass with trees, so that if there are problems, the tanks can be serviced and 2 homes can be connected to each tank. We save dramatically on that basis too. Those are the 2 innovations.
I'm not even debating the system. What I'm concerned about is if we're passing this, and the reason you said, we needed, because we're approving the PUD, why it's even being discussed now, I was a little thinking that would be later. But my problem to y'all is, I talked to Michael Adams also, and he did say TDEC, would have to approve it. They have never done a system like this. So I'm a little worried about the rules and regulations and who's responsible, especially since it's going into a stream, which feeds into larger streams. So I just want to make sure that we have a discussion about this. And then I'd like to see, I asked Michael to send the rules and regulations for the sand filtration system, and I haven't got them as yet today. So I just think that as a board, we need to make sure, now, all the research I've done, it seems to be a system that, is a viable option and works. But we're dealing with Dixon Water. Yes, they may maintain it, but they said without a doubt that TDEC would have to approve it, that they have not ever done one of these systems. So I think that we need to make sure that we're having the right conversations.
Yeah, for me to feel comfortable approving this tonight, I don't know if we could get that information. The big thing is, approving a PUD, it will stay to this property forever. So, we approve 125 lots. If they can or can't do it, we are approving it with the roadways as they're laid out. There's other things involved there, but for me, it's kind of, the density is one thing we need to discuss. Can they do a sewer that can handle this many lots on this small parcel? And again, that seems like a question that is going to be in the works for quite a while.
I'm perfectly willing to. I just like something we
That
can
you
all
could move
work
to the
with.
next step,
Yeah,
sure.
because obviously we're all in the same boat.
Well,
If I can't make it work, then I don't want you to be bedeviled by what I wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
So, if there's a way you can say, hey,
Well,
we accept the logic of the premise, but we have to, before we formally approve it, see that TDEC and everyone else is on board with the engineering to make it viable.
I think that's all that we're asking. If we can get pre-approval or something that from TDEC that says they will
Yeah,
approve that
and
system.
if I don't get those approvals and those engineering clearances, the whole thing
Change
vanishes.
plans, yeah.
It just disappears.
That's without us moving forward tonight.
yeah.
Like I said, I plan on approving the PUD also.
The one thing I noticed right off the bat with this is too what Will said, is the lack of detail engineering, and I understand this is a conceptual plat.
Yeah, I'm trying to hold off on,
Sure, but with a PUD, my understanding is that that's kind of when you come in with a PUD, you kind of have to take that to the next level, because, we're basing everything on the roadways, and, grades may come into play. Certain turnarounds, you've got some cul-de-sacs, you have a street that just kind of dead ends over here behind.
well,
the
we've
center.
followed all the architectural formats for the curve radiuses, and you can see how I've followed the contours of the grade. The problem with the 5-foot contours on the topography we get from the overlays at the county, they're not accurate. A lot of the blue line overlays they show are 20 to 25 foot off the topography they show. So I'm going to have to go in with a 2-foot field survey, and I'm going to have to go in and probably remove the trees to get a serious fix on what and how the real contours are. But you can see I'm following the contours so that I can grade with a minimum of cut and fill. The idea is I've taken a full turn lane off Cox Pike, and I've created a forked egress and access Y with each side of that Y over 100 feet long, so that cars can pull off Cox the length of the subdivision, 600 feet, and pull into or out of the subdivision without stacking up or blocking traffic on Cox Pike. I've followed the contours so that when you work through that roundabout, the roads stay at a gradual incline that takes you from 880 at the curb up on Cox Pike to a low point of 815. So it's a drop of 60-plus feet, which means all of the sewer and all of that gray water will flow without pumps to the bottom of the subdivision. And you can see all the land I've left open there for terracing on that outside eastern drop-off with the detention area that leads to the blue lines and the small pond below it. So I have land there, and I have highways that have the proper radiuses, I have the turn lanes. I've done what I think can be done. I don't need certainty to spend money to take this through the distance and see if it works. I understand that when we come in with preliminaries, we'll have real working drawings that'll GPS correctly on site for the excavators. But right now, we have followed all the formulae. It's just a question of getting involved with the people at TDEC, which is a discussion-intensive process, and then they have their own soil studies.
No, I definitely agree with you that you've definitely maximized your lots that you could do on the workable part of the topo. I'm not arguing that. This is, they're well stacked in there, and you're definitely maximizing it. I guess we just need to have this discussion of what do we, are we going, what kind of density and zoning do we want to make this with an RM8 or,
It sets a precedent, that's for sure, so.
sure.
While y'all are considering that, I'll offer a little bit of solace, I guess, or peace. At the time, obviously, a final master plan would be required to come back in that would include detailed engineered design plans for all the stuff that we've talked about. At that time that comes in, your zoning ordinance states that the planning commission may approve the final plan if it finds, and it has two things, that the final plan meets the provisions for substantial compliance with the preliminary plan. And the second thing is that the plan complies with all other standards for review, which were not considered when the preliminary plan was approved. So by making it a matter of the record that, and as my comments about the roads, the grading, and the drainage, that as a matter of record tonight, we have not reviewed those technical aspects as a matter of this conceptual plan. So by making that part of the record, I feel like we could easily state that review could take place at the time those engineered design plans came through. And if it was found that some technical compliance wasn't gained by the roads or something else, then you would have reasons for requiring modifications or rejection if the modifications weren't agreeable to the applicant.
Okay,
Is
so
that-
we've got the road and technical thing underway, but
Correct.
again, it's really,
This is not final approval, is what you said.
but this gentleman needs to know, are we going to let him do 125 lots on this subdivision? I understand that through technical, it may be 120, it may be 118, but essentially, he's wanting to know what, if he could run with this ball of 125 lots. So I think that's what we need to figure out or look into further, or.
Is the plan you're gonna present to TDEC for 125 lots?
I can't get more than 125 lots on.
But that's what you're planning on presenting to them?
Yes. I mean, in other words,
He'll present whatever,
you're Mr. Beata, right?
Yes,
Yeah,
correct.
you understand construction. I mean,
sure.
I can't, you can look at the plan. There's no way I can get another lot on there.
No, that's what I say. It's very efficient, and I think it is well laid out. It's just this is, in my mind, it's then about density. And I personally, I live in Polson Place, which is right here, which is half acre. Now, I do believe, I'll just say that I do think the future of Fairview, because of the step system of half acre lots, is no more. That's just the nature of it, because of the need to have land to dump your effluent. In your case, the stream discharge, that's new on me just from my conversations with Water Authority. The kind of how we've gotten to this obviously is through a moratorium, and the moratorium was based on discharge. You know, obviously it wasn't properly treated, but discharging to creeks. So to hear that we're looking at maybe discharging into creeks again, you know, I would think that's probably a little bit of an uphill battle, but you know, all that is for future
And I'm not-
discussions
you
for
know,
to
I'm not-
have. But again, I'm just trying to think of what, you know, what density, and I mean, it's up for us here to discuss, so.
Well, let me say something again, because you can understand this. Were my numbers wrong? Isn't it terribly hard for builders to build today a house with profit at $225,000 to $250,000, $125 a square foot? It's hard to build a house for less than 95 that you can be proud of. And no one wants to sell a lot for under 40,000. There's got to be some give here, or we're never going to get the kind of people and the kind of houses that are the backbone of a community's growth. So I don't want this to be seen as an absolute precedent. There's a need, and I'm assuming if I take that amenity area, and if we have builders working together to combine their purchasing power and their sub-relationships, we can get houses with a street statement and an amenity center and a great view plane, because the flip side of tough topography is wonderful views.
The one thing for this, because I do view this as high density, the other thing being on the planning commission, understanding the layout of this town, you know, we have two state highways that intersect this town nicely. And I think, as Frank had mentioned, where Brownland Farms is, you know, where they utilize that a little more, you know, location-wise. Now, I know, you know, this is available, this land was for sale, and, you know, this is what you're looking at to start off. But, you know, again, I'm kind of leaning towards something less dense. The one way that I've understood the code is to look at it as a, for the step system is, our codes have conservation and walkable subdivisions. And I think the way to look at the zoning, or an easy way for all of us not to think, not RM8, but to look at it as an overall zoning of the 32.x acres and say, you know, what's an RS20, what's an RS15, and approach it that way, if that makes sense. And then his conservation will be putting that, you know, say it's 30 acres, say the zoning is, say they're half-acre lots, because I'm better at math in those tens, but so 60 lots you could put over the entire project. Well, then you could put those 60 lots on your 12 acres, and the rest would be open space. I'm not saying RS20, but I think that might be a good way for us to, you know, put it in our heads a little bit, so we could say this is an RS15 conservation PUD. That would be 2.9 lots an acre, and what is that over 32 acres, and kind of look at it there.
Well, I know in other counties, one of the
92.
One of the approaches is when you have difficult topography and you set aside 50% of the land for conservation because it's unbuildable, you reduce the size of the lots and you
Sure.
modestly increase.
Yeah, and that's what I mean. So looking at it as a whole, it would be RS15. Looking at it on paper, you may have 8 homes in an acre, but, you know, and that's the reason with a PUD is it gives you the ability to set your you know, lot sizes, your setbacks, things like that. I believe Brownland Farms is an RS15 conservation PUD. A subdivision I've been involved with was an RS15 conservation PUD. So that has been set as a president of RS15.
Excuse me a second. Can you bring your microphone down just a little bit?
How do I do
Wondering
that?
what that was.
Just his hand. There you go.
I'll just stand away from it.
So I guess I'll just say it then after that is, I would be more comfortable with looking at this like that, where it would be an RS-15 for the 32 lots, which would allow you,
92 is what I come up with. I was looking
92
at that same
lots.
number just a few minutes ago.
Well, there is a new overlay, in Williamson County where they have an RS-10, which allows for side yards of smaller widths. The whole point here was to try and get down to not zero lot lines, but lots where in an urban district, the standard format is a 20-foot setback in the front, a 30-foot setback in the back, or a 15-foot setback, depending on the length of the lot. I was looking for 20 in the front, 15 in the back, and 5 foot on the side yards, so that I could get more transformers and utilities for every 200 foot of road. Because of the excess road I put in with that roundabout to make the terrain work. So you understand what I'm talking about. It's kind of like going to an RS-10, which is what most people think of as 4 units to the acre.
We just don't have that zoning here.
I know you don't, but it is a commonplace in other markets in Williamson County, so I just want to bring that up.
sure.
I think our problem, or my problem, because I've developed a subdivision very close to this one. And as our job up here as a board, we have to, I want growth, so don't take this wrong. But we've got to control it in a manner that protects the people that's already here and the people that's already close to this. So in saying that, personally, I think 125 units on 32 acres is a lot, a little excessive in my opinion, but that's only my opinion. And I'll say I'd have to, me and Mr. Beata must be thinking a lot alike, because I run the numbers thinking about the RS-15 a few minutes ago, and it's actually 93.3. I just checked it again. And that conforms a little more with our current land use plan, the way I understand it. So I'm not as concerned about the TDEC issue as I am the overall density, because we don't control TDEC. I mean, that's none of us here can influence them. They're gonna do what they want to do. So my concern is solely with the density.
You understand the cost issues on the number of lots you get laying the utilities. So that's where I'm
I do.
coming from.
Oh, I understand your side too.
I'm kind of with them. I think the RS-15 would be more I don't know that we're ready to change this yet. And it's not to say, unfortunately, you're the first, but I don't know that as a community, I would feel comfortable yet doing this. And then the TDEC situation, I mean, I understand, but my concern is not really as much as if they approve it, great. But I think we're going in unfiltered waters right now, and I didn't mean to use unfiltered water.
Uncharted
I
territory.
don't know how that just came out, but I think we could do it with the approval of TDEC, but I still worry about what Dixon Water Authority has in place, because it's real easy for them to say, yeah, this is a great system, here you go, Fairview, use it, but it's our neighbors that are affected. I mean, our streams, it's our community. Now, I don't think TDEC would approve something, I would hope, that was not an efficient system, but it is our community. So I just would feel better when we got some answers from Dixon Water. Because what I've learned, especially with the sand filtration systems, that that there's been a lot of people that go ahead of us, and there's a lot of learning curves out there. I mean, you can look at Franklin and Rutherford County and even Wilson County, I mean, in lawsuits because they didn't have a clear picture of who was responsible for what. And so, and I'm sure Dixon Water is, will do that proper steps, and I don't know that we have to talk about it now, but it is just talking amongst Shaw, that it is a concern to me because, you know, I don't know that we want to be their test to see how the system works. It's going to be our community and is actually going in. Now, everything he has said, as far as what I've researched, and, you know, I haven't found a lot out, so I'm not really opposed to the system. I just want to protect our community. That's my main concern.
Maybe, if I may, maybe what we can do, there are two issues then. The T-deck one is an overriding issue. The density one, it seems to me, is the issue that has to be swallowed or coughed up at this point. So I have no problem if it would help, and you want to defer this to the next meeting, and we try and set up a group that will sit down with Dixon and T-deck to clear.
I think that would go a long
Yeah.
way in looking at, because to maintain this number of houses, it's going to be rezoned from a low density directly the opposite direction to a high density. And there's a couple of questions, but I think that's a great idea, because that'll clear up, in my mind, about 65% of the question right there to start with.
And then you people, I mean, it's your community. You can decide what density you want. I'm just here to tell you that.
How much more growth are you looking at from this project right here?
I'm sorry?
How much more growth on this location are you looking at? With purchasing more land or whatever?
I am talking with adjacent property owners on another 70 acres. It's much more difficult topography.
Will that some of that come off of lot 77 and lot 125? Those are dead ends without cul-de-sac.
The Tidwell properties
Okay.
are 39 and 39.1 on the parcels for map 43.
Okay.
They're immediately to the south. And they're very difficult topography. You'd have to enter off Dice Lampley and build across two blue lines. So they're,
That's just looking at it, that's what I was thinking about, because I knew, basically, you're leaving these open for access roads
yeah, the
for
thought
future
was.
growth, am I right?
Yeah, the thought was, if we can just stabilize an attractive template for people looking to settle in neighborhoods where the prevailing market is $250,000 to $260,000 for a 2,200 square foot, 3-bedroom home.
Everything I've read lately, you're exactly right, as far as entry-level homeowners.
Yeah, I mean, that's what you want to, that's the meat that you want to build the community around. And if you can stabilize that sector and get the price per square foot up because of the appeal it generates, then those same people are going to move up to 325 and 350. And my thought was the more difficult land would be larger lots that are more like 75 by 150, which is a traditional R15.
Just one more quick question here, because you tell me, on those dead ends by lot 125 and 77, they're going to be a turnaround there? That has to be at least a 50-foot design in there.
Well,
It can be
I'm used to
temporary, but it has
designing stub outs to adjacent properties, and normally you can end a stub out in either a flat cutoff or a radius.
Those are the only two locations that I've seen.
Yeah, I left 2 stub out connections because I know that almost everyone in that turn on 10 acres, 6 property owners to Hall, which is a very old, just ditched cul-de-sac, they all want to trade out. But you know, you can't pay $100,000 an acre. So,
Just for discussion, I would make a motion that we form a committee to investigate this, defer it and form a committee to investigate this with Water Authority, Dixon, and with TDEC. Is there a problem with that, Larry? That works?
Yeah, I think you had a motion on the floor to
For
do something.
discussion.
For discussion.
Well, there's no such thing as a motion for
Well,
discussion.
that's what he said, so you could have stopped us then.
Well,
You made
I
the
mean, if we
motion.
don't have it, then we wasted all our time because we
no.
didn't have anything
Let me
amendment.
I think I can withdraw my original motion.
and yes, But let me clarify something, because the reason I didn't say anything about it, a motion to discussion, for discussion, is a motion to approve. You either make a motion or you don't make a motion. You make a motion to approve, there's no such thing as a motion for discussion. You get a motion on the floor, you get a second, and then you have your discussion. Whether it's a motion for discussion, the discussion part really carries no weight. So I just let it go because it's a motion for.
I'll remove my original motion. Who seconded it?
I believe I said that.
Moves here, and I'll make a new motion that we form a committee along with the developer to enter discussions with Dixon Water Authority and TDEC. And just to go over this, but we want to expedite things for you. The last thing that was in front of you, the reason we did it was to expedite that system, but it didn't have to come back again.
I already have a call in for TDEC, and we're working on an appointment. Maybe we can schedule it sometime. It's for other conversation, but maybe we can schedule it pretty quickly, so.
Do you want to address the density issue now, or do you want to defer it?
I'm fine with addressing the density, because I don't believe that's going to change for me one way or the other. And I'll propose the RS-15 PUD of 93 lots.
We got a motion on the floor.
Got one motion already, just to defer everything.
Okay.
Can we do the motion and have a discussion? Can we vote on the motion and have a discussion?
You need to have your discussion before you vote on your motion.
This is a rezoning.
Because what you're limited to now is discussion on
Yeah.
motion to defer. If you're wanting to go back and have just an original discussion, you're going to have to propose an amendment. You need to discuss the amendment.
With this being I don't think there was ever a second either, Sharon. I mean,
Then if you want to go back and discuss it, you can withdraw your motion and then make it after you discuss it.
I'll withdraw and let you take it.
who, me?
Yes, no, I mean, you know what.
No.
we
Well,
want.
I want to,
Matt
Mr.
was-
Mitchell
You know
was
what we
wanting,
want, yeah.
was wanting to talk, and
Well, my whole thing is, you know, I'm with y'all, it's the density issue because TDEC is TDEC. They're gonna do what they wanna do. The Adidas pumps and filter system, is that what?
That's one of the main, that's the Pinckney operation.
Right, that's the picnics, and, I mean, they're proven, they've been in as long as Dixon, I don't have a problem with that as long as Dixon agrees to take care of the pumps and the filters, you know, because they can't leave that up to, somebody's got to maintain them systems.
No, I mean, Dixon, in Williamson County, I mean, this was the point when Williamson County first wrangled with TDEC. It wasn't a problem with the system, it was the theoretical issue of if the system doesn't work, who's accountable?
Right.
Because citizens in Fairview will turn to you all, they won't turn to the state.
Right. Well, I mean, them systems are proven, they work. It's just, somebody's got to maintain the systems in order.
Dixon-
If they're not maintained, they don't work.
Yeah, Dixon is, I mean, I'm told by Mike Adams that they will assume full responsibility integrating their oversight and operation into your political system.
Right.
And I don't worry about that because I take him at face value. He understands what I'm trying to do and will affirmatively support my efforts, but he doesn't control the outcome.
Right.
But he does assume responsibility for this approach or whatever approach TDEC chooses.
I mean, and that's the only issue I have with the step tank. It's a great system, as long as it's maintained and treated right. It's just, if it's not maintained, that's when you have failures and that's when you have the problem.
Well, that's why I want the tanks readily accessible.
Correct.
Off the road. If the only issue is density, you all can choose whether you want to defer it or address it.
Yeah, I mean, density's my issue. The rest of it's not, it's kind of out of our hands, the way I look at it.
I mean,
I'm sorry.
regardless of whether there's a motion, I'll set up a committee with TDEC. I'll do
Right.
whatever you want to cooperate with you. But
Well, I think we
formally,
can only discuss the zoning because he's asked for this. I don't think we can amend his rezoning application. I think we either have to turn this down and just or defer this and give him
Make a recommendation.
our thoughts on what we would approve or what we would like to see, and he can come back with that in form of another rezoning application, unless I'm thinking wrong.
I've noticed a lot of these have densities and previous approvals of 3.2 to 3.3. How do you interpret an R15?
That's what we were talking about earlier,
15 is
2.9.
2.9 units.
Okay. So what is Brownland Farms, for instance?
I believe they're 2.8, and it's actually, I believe it's gone down since they've had to adopt a step system
Since they went to
Yeah.
step system, it's about, what was it, 80
to 640 lots, correct?
80 lots, yeah.
So an RS15 is a 2.8,
2.9.
2.9?
Yes.
Okay. And there is no interim 4.0 or 3.5?
No, that's it. Can somebody clarify something else? I was told before that on any RM, whether it be 8 or 12, it would not allow for single family.
Well, if you look in the zoning code, it does allow, RM8, does allow single family. If it will chart what's allowed in that.
Well, I was advised wrong, but that's fine.
I know what you're saying, it's fully, it's intended to be multifamily, it says multifamily with height, but it is allowed.
There's
Frank
a-
and I were looking over that code, and it's very confusing. That's something we need to take a look at, because it does say RM, which to me is residential multifamily, but in the code, it says that allows for single-family dwelling, which I think we need an R8 and an RM8. Those need to be separate, but that's for a different night, I guess.
Is this development doable at 2.9 lots
I won't
per
know
acre?
until, you're talking about losing 30 lots roughly. And I don't know. I mean, it's just a question of the costs. I wanted to max out my utility costs because I've got difficult grading issues. I've eliminated the cut and fill, but there's still going to be a lot of grading. So it comes down to the cost of laying those utilities. You know what I was trying to do? I was trying to get, for every 200 feet of road, more lots, shotgun either side. So maybe something, and then how much am I paying for it all factors in. I've got to deliver to a builder with profit a $35,000 lot, wouldn't you agree?
Yes. I know both sides of it, so there's I don't know what you're giving for the land, and I don't want to know. So that's my variable. Everything else I've got a handle on. And in my,
Well, land is going at 10,000 an acre.
so I don't want to sway anybody else up here on their opinion, so I'll hope we can discuss, we'll have a conversation about building and developing at a later time.
But you know what I'm saying.
Oh, I do. I'm with you 100% on, I know
Okay.
it's expensive.
I mean, I'm not exaggerating it, right?
No.
Okay. There is a need, and it all comes down to how can you cut your costs to meet that need?
Can you advise, Larry, whether or not, there was a question a minute ago about the zoning, that all we can do is approve or deny because you can't really amend the zoning? What's your recommendations on that?
Well, you haven't approved any zoning yet.
Right?
So if you deny this, you can defer it. You don't have to deny it tonight. You can defer it because it leaves it open for discussion. But yes, once you put PUD status on there, not this board, but the Board of Commissioners approves it, then that is the zoning.
Right, and we can't change it because the way it's worded on the amendment is, if I wanted to make it RS 15, then he would just have to come back and put it on the agenda as to rezone it
Well, yeah, that would have to be, he would have to request the zoning that he wants, and then you either deny it or you grant it.
Right,
And then
okay.
he can come back, and I would suggest though, since he's already filed this, if he has to come back, he don't have to pay another fee
Yeah.
to amend his zoning. He'd be amending it, not withdrawing it and
I
redoing
agree.
it.
I'm perfectly comfortable if you defer it, and we'll talk with lawyers and everything else
It-
about it. I'll try and get a better handle on the cost differential.
If I might, while he's here, it's gonna come up sometime, I'd like to ask one question. I've got the application and I've got 2 deeds referenced, and then I have a description of each one of those deeds. Then I have attachments, which I assume, if you don't have an answer now, you can get it for me. I have attachment A that has 8.5 acres and 23.61 acres, and they're dated in 2013. Is that the description of the whole parcel rather than the ones that's on the deeds, because they don't match?
They don't match because a new boundary survey was done, and they eliminated some of the
I assume
tax.
it did, but, so your exhibit A covers the entire property?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I needed to know that because I thought that's what it was, but I wanted to be sure because I've got about 4 or 5 descriptions. And
Yeah, they
we
have
can't-
taken the original boundaries. For instance, in the map, you see that pond with the
Right.
triangle? That pond was split in the tax map between the 2 properties, and they wanted to keep it.
And we can't, I mean, when you ultimately reach some agreement, then,
We will file the new meets and bounds and
okay, but when we're rezoning it, we'll have to take this because we have to rezone a piece of property by specific description.
then we can make sure they correlate,
Okay.
sure.
Yeah, that's the exhibit A, I assume. Right, yeah, the one's 8 plus acres and one's 20-something plus acres. Okay, that's what I need to know. And I'd like to, just for clarification for everybody to hear, obviously, neither the city nor Dixon Water Authority will have anything in the ultimate decision of what TDEC does. But I remember 10 or 12 years ago when we were going through this thing, where the city was going to keep the water and the sewer, or were they going to sell it to Water Authority of Dixon? The issue came up in the city, some people are still here, and I know Mr. Hall was here, but I don't think you were in that meeting. I think it was, if I recall correctly, it was me and Al Deck and Mayor Bryson at the time at TDEC down in the LNC Tower, and the city had spent a considerable amount of money. I don't recall the exact amount, so I'm not going to use a figure, but getting a redesign to upgrade the existing sewer plant at the time, and TDEC had said, yeah, go ahead and get your plans together. And they spent the money for the design, and when we went down there for them to say, proceed with this or not, they immediately almost said, we're not going to tolerate any more water into the streams around here. And we said, look, this is going to be super duper new equipment. It's going to be this and that. And the director at the time says, let me make myself clear. You can put any expansion down there you want, but no more affluence going into that stream than what's going right now. I don't care if you take it out of the water tower. It's not going in that stream. So maybe their attitudes have changed, maybe the streams have changed, I don't know, but I'm just putting that out so that everybody knows that 10 or 12 years ago, their attitude was, you aren't putting any more water into these streams, I don't care where it comes from. And we ended up, we could have had the increased capacity, they didn't say you can't put it in there, you just can't use it. So what didn't make a whole lot of sense to add something that you couldn't use. I just put that out because I don't remember other than Mr. Hall, I think he was the commissioner at the time, but I don't think anybody else in here was there at the time.
I wasn't. Read it in the paper. Okay, so we're going to defer this, or do you want to just go ahead and vote the zoning that we want to do and let them move on with the,
Just a suggestion is that we go ahead and just defer it and let him work on what we're more than likely gonna come out with, if he wants to redesign something.
okay.
Because we really don't want to change the zoning tonight, I don't think. Because it's in the low density now, so just defer it with solve all the problems at this point, wouldn't it, Larry?
You have a right to defer it and then, set time for discussion or leave it open for when he can call.
He's in agreement with it, so.
Yeah, he can call Mr. Humber and make some sort of arrangement, or Mr. Hall.
I make a motion to defer it,
With no additional fees for bringing it.
with no additional fees charged.
Second.
We have a first and a second. Any more discussion?
Wait, let me clarify that, because the minutes charged for.
Rezoning.
Rezoning.
Yes.
I don't want to, yeah, I don't want to get caught in amendment, minutes.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
I think the next one, isn't it?
The same thing.
Yeah.
So,
Two sides, same coin.
Okay.
Move to defer.
Second.
All in favor?
aye.
Opposed? Thank you, Mr. Smythe.
Thank you.
8.6, discuss and/or take action on recommendations from the Codes Review Committee. Mr. Humber.
We've got several items that the Code Review Committee has recommended. In your packet there, we'll take the first one, which concerns Design Review Manual, Section 1.101.4, Maintenance of Improvements. You can see what the present wording includes. Maintenance will be performed, including as a minimum the following, which would be buildings, including signs, illuminated elements, landscape and plants which are dead, parking areas, but really, as a practical matter, what we're proposing, the wording that we're proposing is only to really keep number 5 and modify it slightly, but just to say that the property has to be kept free of all refuse and debris. And basically, it refers back to our Section 13 of Municipal Code, which pertains to nuisances in the care of premises to keep from being a nuisance. So that, we're just eliminating basically 1 through 4, which are not really, are not enforceable according to Mr. Cantrell. Are there any questions about that?
Larry, we're just gonna come up with a recommendation to move this forward to the BOC, aren't we?
Yes, yes.
That's all we'll be doing tonight.
That's all you're doing, yes. You're recommending it to the BOC, right?
Just wanna make sure.
It's in the packet. Is that not, y'all have that one in front of you?
Not on the agenda.
Yeah, 8.6.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was looking at the ones that's already been approved, and he's discussing what we had at the last meeting, I'm sorry.
Oh, I see what you did. Oh, Madam Chairman, you said, you read 8.6 from new business, didn't you? Right, that's fine. That's cut, that's fine. Okay, any questions about that particular recommendation from the committee?
Y'all have any questions about that?
Move to approve.
Okay.
We have a first and a second. Any discussion?
I mean, I have just a question, and I'm guessing the reason that it can't be enforced is because it's kind of subjective. Is that the idea, Larry?
Does he have that? You said it.
That's part of it. The other part is that it would require you to go on private property to attempt to enforce this, which you have no right to do. It violates Article 2, Section 29 of the Constitution.
So even if you could visually see it from a public road, it doesn't matter?
Unless it constitutes a health hazard or an immediate safety hazard,
Then it's,
you have no right to go tell me what I can do with my property.
I got you.
Nor can you do it, but it's what violates the Constitution.
Yeah, I'm just curious.
I mean, this is something that we discussed at the review. It is one of those things I feel like that I can't believe it was there if we never could have enforced it anyway. Especially, a lot of this was taken from industry standards. But attorney advised that we can't enforce it, so it's just taking up space. And I think Mr. Humber had mentioned that it's more of a scare tactic. I don't know if I'm using your words, but.
That's fine.
But, you know, it just deters people that we could actually, you know, come back so many years and try to hold people responsible.
There's another reason you couldn't enforce it also. At least 1 and 2 are constitutionally vague. You can't read it and comply with it. Because it has, what my conclusion, if a sign is clean, might not be your conclusion.
That's what I
if a
mean,
sign
yeah,
is clean.
that's what I was
That
saying,
part-
is it's subjective, you can't enforce it. But I kind of see what Patty's saying, where it is kind of go this way or that, but I'm just clarifying, I'm just asking.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna go, I mean, people sat and discussed this more than I did, so, but I just was curious.
Well, actually, I was interested in hearing some of y'all's opinions too.
Just for the discussion that we had during the meeting, the main thing was it just non-enforceable. And just housekeeping on that rule is all we did. We just took that out of it so that that wouldn't be in the codes at all.
Right.
That was the main source behind, in my opinion, why we did it.
Yeah, the one argument to go back and forth, it is kind of, it's kind of out there, just to let people know how we expect them to treat their stuff, whether it's enforceable or not, but if you're looking at it just in that scope, then obviously.
Yeah,
You
we
can
don't
do
want
the
to
same
mislead
thing.
with the code.
Sure.
You can do the same thing under Chapter 13 of the code, and it's not vague.
Okay.
The only vagueness would be if, and that's not vague, if I go by and the sign's, laying on the ground, or the unattended, it's one of these 45-degree angle things, you give me a warning and then you write me a citation and the court can determine whether
Okay.
it's vague or not.
Gotcha.
I do have a question. Will, you weren't at that meeting, so this time, because you didn't hear the discussion. Is this standard practice, or as far as the wording?
Standard practice is, may not be an applicable term for this particular section in your zoning, or in your design review manual. It's very common, obviously, that all cities that have design review would have some form of maintenance requirements. And the language on how that maintenance is carried out varies widely. So I don't think either your current language or your proposed language would be considered irregular in any manner, if that's what you were
Yeah,
seeking.
it is. We talked about this, and I don't mean to rehash it, because the majority of the group agreed, and it's fine, and our attorney says we can't do anything, but I sit around and think, well, how did this all of a sudden become not important when somebody sat there and took the time and thought it was, but the laws change, and, I realize that, but it's just a whole section and none of it's enforceable I just want to make sure that we're not throwing out something that was there for a reason, because most of this stuff is put in place for a reason. Now, they may be 20, 30, 50 years old and times have moved, but
anyway,
There's
that's,
There's nothing in the delineated part that's not covered in the proposed wording
Okay.
part. And that has much more force. Actually, this, the stuff here that is not constitutional, you could take that out and leave the other in, which is in essence what paragraph 5 is the catch-all that you put in, that's put into most ordinances in case something fell through the cracks in the first part, then you can get them in the last part.
Okay.
My thing is, the people that are gonna be looking at this are much better trained in looking for this stuff than, if you wanted to delineate all the things that would constitute litter and debris, you'd have a whole volume of you'd have to go like the IRS and put out regulations to interpret the ordinance.
Do we need a motion, Larry, to move this forward to the BOC?
You've got one. You got a motion and a second.
And a
Yeah,
second.
motion and second.
Yeah, this is approving me getting this ordinance together. I have drafted it, but it's not on your agenda for tonight, as I was saying before. It will be, at maybe the next meeting or whatever, but, that's approving me, drafting the ordinance, and then it'll be presented to you in its written form, and you'll have to actually approve the ordinance itself.
That's right.
Okay, so we have a first and a second.
I'm sorry, it's not an ordinance, it's a resolution.
Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? 8.7, discuss and or take action on resolution number 01-15 PC, a resolution of the Municipal Planning Commission of the City of Fairview, Tennessee, amending the City of Fairview, Tennessee Design Review Manual, Article 1, Section 1-102.2, development subject to design review.
Move to approve, move forward.
Second.
We have first and a second, any discussion? All in favor?
aye.
Opposed? 8.8, discuss and or take action on resolution number 02-15 PC, a resolution of the Municipal Planning Commission of the City of Fairview, Tennessee, amending the City of Fairview, Tennessee Design Review Manual, Article 2, Section 2.2-105.4, interior parking lot area landscaping, subsection 6, interior landscaping flexibility.
If I can, just quick, this is the one we replaced?
That's correct.
Okay. Yeah. Everybody get that? Is replaced in here? Okay.
Move to approve.
Second.
We have first and second, discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? 8.9, discuss and or take action on resolution number 03-15 PC, a resolution of the Municipal Planning Commission of the City of Fairview, Tennessee, amending the City of Fairview, Tennessee Design Review Manual, Article 3, Section 3-0108, issuance of building permits and certificate of occupancy.
Move to approve.
Second.
We have first and a second, discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Madam Chairman, may I address, now that you passed this, may I address an issue that you're going to see in the future? The revision committee will be making recommendations. Some are recommendations, some you'll pass. These that you pass tonight are in the form of resolutions and will go into effect immediately. They are not required to have a public hearing. They're revisions to the design manual. You have another one that you'll have that'll be, you'll see later will be, will be amendments to the subdivision regulations. Those two items, the design review manual and the subdivision regs, are specific to this board. In other words, you have control of them. When you pass those resolutions, they will become effective immediately. Hopefully, the original documents will get revised so that it will reflect the changes and the old ones will be taken out. The subdivision regulations, before you can approve those, once you approve a subdivision regulation change, before it will come before this board, they have to have a 30-day notice that it's going to be here, and we'll have to have a public hearing. The other type of legislation that you will see that will be recommended, some changes, because I've already drafted some of them, are recommendations to the board to change the zoning ordinance. The statute requires that the planning commission see those documents and act on them. You don't have to approve them. You can send it to the board as a recommendation to disapprove. You can send it as a recommendation to approve. You can send it forward with no action at all. But the statute requires that you see them, which is for the secretary and for the chairman. I'm sure that you'll be getting some calls to come by and sign those documents, because once it goes to the board, we'll have a recommendation from the board the date it was recommended, and then it'll go forward to the board. Once it's passed tonight, once they're duly signed and attested to, they will be in force and effect. You cannot pass a zoning ordinance. Only the Board of Commissioners can pass the zoning ordinance, but it does require your recommendation, will require a public hearing. You won't have to worry about scheduling that, because that'll have to be scheduled after it goes to the board. Just wanted to let you know what's going on.
Thank you. Number 9, reports for discussion and information.
Madam Chairman, I still have other recommendations from the committee.
Okay.
Only had one that we discussed. Should we do those now?
Can we do them, Larry? They're not on the agenda,
Yeah, you can go back to them, because you haven't closed the meeting.
but they're not on the agenda. Does that make a difference?
No, they're on.
It's on the agenda, it's
It's on the agenda.
8.6.
I'm sorry.
It just got left out.
They got, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, can we do that?
Go ahead.
Okay, the next one also concerns the design review manual, section 2.103.4, which the present wording reads as, number 1, retention of site feature. A natural setting is one of Fairview's attractive qualities. Streams, wetlands, large rock outcroppings, stands of native vegetation, fence rows, rock walls, cemeteries, and other notable and natural features must be located on the site plan and preserved whenever possible. Bands of trees such as fence rows, when present along the rear lot line, shall be maintained as an effective screen and wind buffer. There's a lot of subjectivity in that one that I think we, you know, I mean, all that is well and good. I mean, it's the intention is good, but we're gonna have a lot of subjectivity. We're gonna have people, next door neighbors, saying, you can't approve development on that property because of this code. So I think that's entirely too,
Restrained.
it's too, subjective, and, the city attorney can comment on it too. The next one is the preservation of notable old structures that are over 50 years old and are valued for their local significance. Well, it's just, there again, I think it's so wide open that I think that's difficult to say. Are we telling someone they can't tear down a 50-year-old structure or older and replace it with a new building? That could be something that also has a lot of subjectivity to it. So the committee recommend that these two things be eliminated.
My concern with those two sections would be, well, I think it's great if you want to keep a 50-year-old building, but if you do, probably would be a better gesture to donate it to Historic Village. But I don't think we can get that far into managing the way you do your property without running the risk of having an inverse condemnation. If you're going to tell me how to run it, you buy it.
So your suggestion is to eliminate those two?
To eliminate those two, but leave the rest of the
Yes.
sections in state.
Move to approve.
Second.
We have first and a second. Any more discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Okay, the next one is from the zoning ordinance 16-103.9 maintenance bonds. This is for landscaping material only. At present time, our code reads that we can only require a 1-year maintenance bond after everything's been installed. but the committee looked at it and said they thought we should, and actually, this maintenance bond is our enforcing authority on being sure that the landscaping has been not only installed properly, but replacements have been made from materials that have died. So the proposed wording is that we require that to be 3 years, and that 3 years begins with the issue of a certificate of occupancy.
If I can insert a little bit right there, we got that from some information from, I guess it was an arborist, who described the first year of planting a tree, it's in shock. Second year, it's either gonna start to mature or not. By the third year is when you know if it's gonna survive or not, so that we don't lose control after the first year, which nobody knows if it's gonna live or not. There was a question about one of the trees out front, all right, Wayne, everybody thought it was dead, but it's not, and that's what the arborist said. That's one of the fundamental things that we went from 1 to 3 on. And it's gonna be a reduced, so correct me if I'm wrong, it's gonna be a reduced amount of maintenance bond. It's not gonna be astronomical up there, so.
And also remember this is, they voted to put in there also irrevocable letters of credit, because all it is a method to get the money that if they don't replace it, you can either get the money and replace it, or you can take the bond and have the bonding company get somebody to replace it. And remember, this is only for the like in the public fair, the build out of the public lands or sidewalks or whatever's going to be used for the public. It is not a bond or a letter of credit to ensure that the buildings, or if they're supposed to build 5 buildings, we don't have anything to do with that other than issuing inspections and the permits. It's not a bond to make sure that the project is finished. It's a bond to make sure that the public part of the project is finished.
Move to approve.
Second.
We have a first and a second. Any more discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Okay, the last recommendation they made concerns a provision in the state law that allows anyone, at present, any building that's less than 5,000 square feet does not require a seal on the design and the plans that are submitted. This would be adding wording to our ordinance that would require all commercial and tenant-built build-outs to submit a stamped plans that unless the improvements are less than 2,500 square feet. So what we're in effect changing is going from 5,000 or under 5,000, we're saying under 2,500. So we would be requiring more buildings to have a seal, whatever appropriate seals are on the plans, depending on what's being developed. And that's what that recommends.
Consideration was given on that part right there too, if you don't mind me putting something to do. If somebody wants to do, put in a half screen or something, they're not gonna have to have an engineer's stamp on it. It's gonna have to be something major, over 2,500 square feet, or a change to be put in through there, because you're gonna be talking about walls and everything as far as the build out goes. So that's one of the reasons it was just reduced to that right there.
Is, I read this and I understand it for, like, you would need an architect to stamp a set of plans, but what about MP&E, mechanical, plumbing, and electrical? Will there need to be, is that how it reads, that those would need to be stamped too, or?
Will, can you shed some light on that? I mean, if you have an architect seal, does that include all of the
No, it doesn't.
design, or you have to
I
have
think
separate?
the question was, do you not have to have it?
Well, no, if you do, I've been involved in some commercial building in Franklin, and they require an architectural stamp and typically a mechanical and plumbing engineer does the M&P, and then the electrical engineer will do that. And I mean, my personal, I hope not, because it's very expensive to have all those people stamps, but I understand the architect, because he at least does fire safety. he does
Yeah.
distance to, you know, doorways. I think an architect would suffice his stamp alone. That's all I just wanted to clarify.
The way the Tennessee Code's written, it says that it's unlawful for any person other than a registered architect or engineer to prepare plans and specifications for any building, blah, 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 blah. So you're not changing that part of the Tennessee Code, you're just reducing from the 5,000 to the 2,500. So the code allows engineer or architect, licensed
Okay.
engineer or
Okay,
architect.
perfect, thank you.
And then the licensing board is responsible for making sure that individuals that are licensed in the various disciplines are actually practicing within those disciplines, so.
If you look at what's attached to that, this is only regarding, section 62-2-102, subsection B, item 1A, no, 1B. It's just changing that one sentence,
Okay.
more or less, is less than 5,000 feet on here now, it should say less than 2,500-ish.
The ordinance mirrors the statute, copies the exact wording of the statute, except as Commissioner Mangrum said, for that 5,000 reduced to 2,500. Generally, if your requirements are more stringent than the state's, they don't have a problem with it in general. If it's you can't do it less, that would be a violation of the state statute, but 1(4)(c), and I've got that with an asterisk by it, allows you to make those changes if you so desire in the statute. So it essentially mirrors the statute except for 2,500. Everything else that's in place about electrical, you know, it doesn't apply to single-family dwellings, et cetera, but they're gonna all have to be electrically inspected. They don't have to be stamped, but they'll have to be inspected before they're energized, because power companies are not going to energize unless you have it inspected and it passed.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Move to approve.
Second.
First and a second, any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Number 9, reports for discussion and/or information. 9.1, Director of Planning Codes, Mr. Humber.
The only thing I have to report is, based on the first 2 months of the year, permits for single-family houses, we will take to Department of 60. So it's picked up considerably, and we're very encouraged by that. That's really all I have. I want to mention this about the codes review committee. I have forms that any of you would like to suggest something to be changed, you can bring it. I mean, or you can give it to me and I can bring it to the committee. Wide open, whatever they want. If there's something you feel like needs to be changed, please bring it forward and we'll have the committee to review it. So I just want to be sure everybody understood. That's all I have.
Thank you. 9.2, City Engineer, Mr. Allen.
Thank you. I know it's late, so I'll try to be quick, but if you give me 5 minutes, I would like to circle back to the PUD rezoning that you had. The state of Tennessee Department of Environment and Conservation will not permit nor allow any of those proposed sand filter and UV systems unless a licensed and approved authority agrees to take ownership, maintenance, and operation of that facility. So before TDEC would ever permit or allow that facility to be constructed, they would mandate that Dixon sign on and agree to not only operate and maintain it, but they would own that system once it's installed. So while it's certainly admirable to have some concerns about being the first, they would be regulated on that system and that treatment plant, because in essence that's what it is, just like they are for all other treatment plants that they own. no matter where it is within their jurisdiction. So they would receive notices of violation if they weren't in compliance with those permit requirements, and they would be on the hook for making those fixes and corrections and maintaining it as permitted. So I wanted to clarify that. I think it's good that you're sitting down with TDEC and Water Authority Dixon County, but I want you to go in there with appropriate expectations. I anticipate that they will say, we're all for these systems, but, we want to see all the data, all the engineering application, the design calculations, the full-blown deal before they're going to comment specifically on whether that system's going to be allowed. So I don't want you to go into that meeting hoping to have a yay or a nay on if that specific system would be allowed. The other thing that was mentioned was the applicant had desired to place the septic tanks within the street right-of-way between the sidewalk and the back of the curb. That is an innovative approach. I want to caution you that due to the city not owning that tank or the maintenance or replacement or fixing of that tank, that would be, again, under the control of Water Authority Dixon County. I'm not saying they do this, but if a tank needed to come in and they needed to dig it up and replace it or repair it in whatever manner, and then they left a big mess, then that mess would be within the city's street right-of-way. So while it may be convenient for accessing that tank, it could present problems to you with those tanks being located within your right-of-way. The other thing that, and this will be the last thing I'll mention, there is a provision in your PUD requirements that call for the perimeter lots around a PUD development to be 75% of the lot area and 90% of the lot width for the adjoining zoned lots. So if you had an adjoining lot, a neighboring lot that was an RS20, then any lots within the PUD that border that, those lot requirements would need to be 75% of the size of the RS20 and 90% of the width. So that's something we'll need to take a look at when what I assume will be a revised plan with the 2.9 density per acre. So that's all I've got. If you got any questions, I'll be glad to answer them, but I think the discussion tonight was really good. I think we certainly, as already discussed, we want to be amenable to development and make sure that, we're not restricting it excessively, but at the same time, we have a responsibility to make sure that that development, that growth is done in a manageable and designed and considered manner.
I've got one question, and this is strictly just speculation. But if I recall that plat correctly, there's only a handful of those lots that actually borders the adjoining property owner. She's got green space around the entire perimeter of that property, if I remember correctly. Would that allow him to go around that? Since that's actually green space that touches the adjacent homeowners?
That's a good question. The way the language is written in the PUD section, it states that, well, I'll find it. But it basically states that any, give me just a second. Lots fronting a street along the boundary of a PUD shall contain at least 75% of the minimum lot area and 90% of the lot width required by the adjoining zoning district. So the way it's worded is, lots fronting on a street that is a boundary, an exterior street within the PUD, if they front that street, regardless of where the back is, if there's green space between or not, but if they front that street that is an exterior street on the outside perimeter of the PUD, then they would be required. That's my interpretation.
And that's strictly on the PUD, though. If he comes back with RS or R15 with no PUD, then.
Correct.
that's off.
Correct. If he comes back with R15 as a straight zone, then that goes away.
Thank you. 9.3, City Attorney, Mr. Cantrell.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I was not going to say anything, but something Will said made me want to expand just a little bit on the last thing he said about putting the tanks in the public right-of-way. I too would have some great concern about that. I know it makes it easier to get to it and service it because you can probably drive up the main road and stop right by it. But if the city allows that to happen, you are acquiescing in allowing private individual to use public property. And while that is not in itself illegal, if they put it out there and somebody comes along and they trip over it, somebody gets hurt with it, they leave it, like Will said, they leave it a mess and it doesn't get cleaned up real quick and somebody gets hurt with it, guess who's gonna get sued with everybody else? Because you permitted them to put it on your property. We can't go down there and plead that they're trespassers and we didn't know they were there. So I would have a great deal of problem with that because once somebody gets hurt, it's too late then. I'm not trying to tell you how to do your job, I'm just just want you to be aware that if you do that, don't be surprised when one day you get the inevitable lawsuit, because if somebody gets hurt, they're gonna sue the owners of the property, they're gonna sue the developers, they're gonna sue WADC, they're gonna sue the city, and, you know, that's up to you, it's your call what you make. I don't intrude into your domain, I just want you to be fully informed of what you would be creating. That's all I have.
Thank you. 9.4, City Manager, Mr. Hall.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. I just want to apologize. I did misquote something a while ago. That has not gone through the Board of Commissioners because we canceled that meeting, so, but due to the weather. So that may be the reason the mayor and the vice mayor couldn't recognize those. So we'll put them back on the agenda next month. This is on the recommendations. And after it goes through the Board of Commissioners, then I'll give you the right information. So anyway, I do apologize for that. And the only other thing I'd like to say, this was an exceptional board meeting. Y'all did a great job tonight. So I just wanted to thank everyone for all their hard work and their diligence to make sure we do the right thing. Thank you.
Item number 10 is communication from the Planning Commission members. Mr. Dowdy. Mr. Mitchell. Mayor Carroll.
I don't have anything.
Mr. Mangrum.
Nothing tonight. Thank you.
Mr. Sutton.
I just want to say, a lot of the stuff we did tonight was done because of the Code Review Committee, and they put in a lot of hours to come to these determinations that we have. And there's going to be a lot more changes come up that we've just barely dusted the cover of it. So, you know, things have changed, times have changed. The legality of a lot of things have changed when cases have been heard. And we want to simplify it. We want to make it easy for everybody to understand and make it very clear, especially people coming into town that wants to do business here and build here. We need to keep working on that. So if anybody has any suggestions or is looking at it, please let somebody know, Frank know, and he'll be glad to bring it in front of us. But I appreciate all the hard work everybody's doing on the review committee. Thank you.
Mr. Beata.
I've had something for Will that I've been seeing, and I was wanting to get his take on it or get you to bring something back next month. Did nothing bad, but just, you know, we do the 630 curb and gutter. I've been around lately and in Murfreesboro and that, and I've been seeing more of what I believe they call a rollover curb. That's a curb and gutter, but a lot smaller. And I just, you know, was hoping you could bring something back maybe next month to talk about it. I feel like it's something maybe we should look at or an option for our codes. It just seems to be kind of the next thing with the curb and gutter. And I think for residential use, it's more it's less obtrusive in your face than the 6:30, and there's some other things I could discuss on that next month too. So just wanted to bring that, but thank you.
I did want to say that Mr. Butler called and said that he was out of town tonight on business, so he wasn't going to be able to be here. And we had a good meeting. It was long, but, you know, we've got to, with the way our city's growing and all the new development and housing and residential that's coming, this is important. So I think it was a good meeting tonight, and I appreciate everybody's hard work. Just remember, we've got all these new businesses here in Fairview, and if we want them to succeed, please patronize them and think about, before you leave our city, to spend money. Just, if it's here, spend your money here. We're adjourned.
Yeah. Don't we have a meeting tomorrow night too?
Not tomorrow night,
Wednesday,
tomorrow's Wednesday.
night of the week.
It is not, it's Thursday.
Very much.
When I was talking to him, and I told him I didn't want to know what he was getting for, but he said 10,000. I was like, any fucking money. Half acre lot's worth of 10,000. So I was going to say that, and I thought, I'm not, because I'll make somebody buy it. So I figured, no, I'm not going to buy it. So you're exactly right. And, I know that was done in the 70s. Well, I'm not sure that he'd even get the 90, but that would allow him for 90, but the deposit amount allowed, I think he can get, I believe he can get somewhere between 70 and 90. That's a good 100 all day long. He's talking, I was like, your numbers don't work. No, they don't.